Good day, everyone, especially to the beginning teachers and the aspiring teachers. Today, I'm going to teach you how to write a good lesson plan. You should know that a good lesson plan should have an alignment between the objectives, activities, and evaluation. So in here, I'm going to give you some tips. Are you ready? I hope you are. So in here, as you encode your lesson plan, it should have a proper heading. So it's up to you whether you will write Republic of the Philippines pa, but you can start with detailed lesson plan in whatever subject that you are going to teach. Of course, you write demonstration teaching, the date and time. That is very much important. You can also specify to what grade level, for example, detailed lesson plan in General Chemistry 1, grade 11. Detailed lesson plan in General Chemistry 1 for grade 11. So, you can replace the General Chemistry 1 into whatever subject that you're going to teach. First, we're going to write the objective. The format that I'm going to teach you is the format being used by the Department of Education. So since you are aspiring teachers who would become part of the DepEd in the future, it is also important to familiarize yourselves with the format of the lesson plan used by the public school teachers. So setting the objectives part is the most important because as part of the lesson plan, this is where you are going. This is the end goal that you have to achieve at the end of the lesson. So since it follows the format of DepEd, you can see in there the content standards, performance standards, and learning competencies, which are found in the curriculum guide of DepEd. So those stated there are taken from the curriculum guide, from the content standards up to the learning competencies. So what is the importance of getting the standards from the curriculum guide? The curriculum guide is like a Bible to the teachers. It guides the teachers on the content or the subject matter that they're going to teach. So, for example, in here, the learning competency is to describe how rocks undergo weathering. You can see the code. S stands for science, 11 is for grade level, ES is for earth science, and then 2 denotes the quarter, so that means to say second quarter. A is for the number of weeks, so A stands for week 1, and then the number 22 stands for the number of learning competencies. So why is it important to understand and know the learning competencies? From the learning competencies, you have to craft the objectives. So your specific objectives will base its verbs on the learning competency. So like for me, in order to come up with the 3 objectives, I have to know the learning competencies because from there, I will be able to identify what are the objectives for the lesson. So, the learning competencies will be our basis in formulating the specific objectives. So, after the learning competency, you have to craft your specific objectives. So one for the cognitive, one for the psychomotor, and one for affective domain. Remember you're learning with the different verbs used in writing the objectives, the behavioral objectives. So, since the learning competency here is to describe how rocks undergo weathering, I can just copy that for the cognitive so that my plan will be consistent to the learning standard. So, number one, this is part of the cognitive domain, describe. So that means to say, at the end of this lesson, the students will be able to describe how rocks undergo weathering. So remember that each lesson is comprised of 60-minute lesson. You have to identify what grade level and what is the proficiency level that you are expecting with your students. So like here at the end of 60 minutes, so that means to say this lesson is for 1 hour, and then the lesson is for grade 11 students, and then they should have at least 80% proficiency level. So meaning to say, as a teacher, I have to set this standard that my students will learn, 80% of them will learn the competency 80% above, so not 80% below. So like if I have 10 item test, so my students should get 8 or score of 8. Next, for the psychomotor, it has something to do with the performance of the students. So I wrote here illustrate because they're going to draw, to illustrate using different graphical illustrations. Illustrate the different processes of weathering. And then for number 3, that is affective, they have to give the importance of weathering to the environment, because when we say affective domain, the students must be able to value the importance of what they are studying. So if you're going to craft your 3 objectives, make sure to visit the cognitive domain, the Bloom's taxonomy, so you will be guided. Next 2 objectives is the content. Okay, so this is the topic that you're going to discuss. So like for example here, I wrote for the content earth processes or the exogenic processes. So for the learning resources, you list there the available materials that you're going to use. Like for example, books, diba? For references, you can use books as reference and internet sources. So like for example, in DepEd, we have the teacher's guide. So we could just write their teacher's guide in general chemistry. And we also have the learner's material provided by DepEd. So I could write learner's material for grade 11. And then for textbook, you can write the author, the book, and then of course the pages. If you get from DepEd Common or other online learning portal, you can just write there. Of course, your other learning resources, like your materials, presentation, video, so you can write there. If you use picture, then you can include there. And then the handout, for example. Always remember that when you do the demonstration teaching, you have to get at least 3 references, be it online or textbook. so that you can have different sources of information. First, objective. Second, content. Now let's move on to procedures. How do we write the procedures? Of course, you have to separate two columns for teachers' activity and then students' activity. Most of the teachers have encountered errors in placing the apostrophe. For example, in teacher's activity, the apostrophe should be in between R and S. For students naman, because they are many, so we place the apostrophe after the S. So don't forget that. We'll begin with preparatory activities. So you have to make sure that before you begin your lesson, everything is organized, everything is in order, your classroom environment is okay, and your students are okay. So in here, of course, you ask your students to arrange the chairs, to pick up all the trash under their chairs before you can ask them to stand for a prayer. And then afterwards, checking of attendance, not anymore for roll call. You should have one classroom monitor to check. So, right, you could have, please check the attendance for today. Like how many are present, you can ask them to raise their hands, or how many are absent, or how many are late. And then you start with greetings, good morning, right? And ask them if they're okay. And it's okay not to be okay. So if they're good, and then they can just respond with a gesture. So after preparatory activities, of course, you have to review the lesson. If the lesson has the prerequisite lesson or the previous topic, but if it happens to have no previous lesson, you can present a new lesson. Okay, you can ask them what was the previous lesson. Remember, the teacher keeps on asking and the student should be the one answering the question. So when you write your lesson plan, you have to detail the possible answers of the students, just like in this example. So reviewing of lesson, this should be fast, like 3 minutes is enough. After reviewing the lesson, you can proceed to motivation. So in here, you can think of exciting activities. Like for example, in here, I have a game activity for the students to arouse their attention. So I have a puzzle that they're going to solve, and then the fastest group will be the winner. So of course, the jigsaw puzzle should be related to the topic. So you can think of other motivation to get their attention. You can use for pick one word or video. So it should be at most 5 minutes. And then after your activity, you should ask them what was about the activity. And based from the activity, what do they think will be your topic for today? So they have to answer that. So after motivation, you can go directly to the presentation. So first activity, you can have the students do the task by group. So like in here, I have a group think share. Of course, it has to be aligned with the objective that is to describe how rocks undergo weathering. So, and then they're going to illustrate, just like what I have written in the objective part, the objective 1 and 2. So remember, when you let the students do the group activity, you have to be clear with your instruction and provide them the rubric so that they will be guided. Okay, and you also have to allot time for the activity. Like this one, they have 5 minutes to discuss, 2 minutes to present, and afterwards you process the activity. Ask them about their experiences. Actually, there are many teaching strategies that you can think and have the students do the different tasks that you have learned from your lessons in education. So just remember that you can employ the different strategies depending on its application to the objectives. So for example, you can have additional activities like in here. They're going to illustrate, be it in a tableau presentation, in art gallery, song and dance. So aside from their group activity, they have another group activity. So depending on the teacher on how she would plan the lesson. So you can have 2 or more different strategies to introduce to the students. So it depends on you. You can think of a variety of strategies that you think are applicable as long as you are guided by the objectives of the lesson. So do not deviate from the objectives of the lesson. It has to be aligned with your procedures. So after letting the students do the activity, you have to ask questions that will lead them to a formative assessment. It's like in other format, it's like application or abstraction or analysis of the lesson. So you can ask how, why, and other questions that are related to the lesson, of course, and let them answer. You have to solicit every idea from your students. And do not forget to commend, to praise, to acknowledge your students after they gave the answer. So at this point, the teacher is asking the students on the application of the things that they learned to real life situations. Like, how can you apply your learning in this area? Is weathering important? So let the students answer. So when you write your lesson plan, you have to write their possible answers. So do not copy students' answer vary. So things like that. You have to fill in with the assumptions that they're answering like this. So provide some example. So after application, it's generalization or abstraction. Of course, you have to ask questions like how, why, questions that will lead them to think, to analyze situation, okay? And then ask them to generalize the learning that they get from the lesson. And you can also add some trivia for them to get updated. So that's how you do it. So after generalization, it's evaluation. Remember that when you construct your test, it should be aligned to the objectives of your lesson. So you can construct up to 10 or up to 5 depending on your decision. So you also provide the key answers for that and provide also a clear directions. So after that, you have to check whether it is congruent to your objectives. And then afterwards, you can also get the index of mastery, like how many got 5, how many got 4, and so on. So lastly, you have the assignment or additional activities. So your assignment should be related to your topic. This should serve as additional activity. It could be a question or a journal entry. So it depends on you. And most importantly, do not forget to write who prepared the lesson. So you can write prepared by, of course, your name and affix your signature. So I hope I have given you some tips that you could use when you write your lesson. For a free soft copy of the detailed lesson plan, please subscribe, like, and drop your email ad on the comment box. So thank you everyone for listening. Please follow also my YouTube channel for more educational videos. Happy teaching!